Delighted to welcome the internationally renowned early years consultant, Dr. Sue Roffey. Some of you will remember her from our last webinar we did back in June. This is part 2, and part 3 will follow next year. So today, Sue will be discussing what is age appropriate. She's going to be checking contributory factors. She's going to talk about communicating what actually is needed clearly, concisely and consistently, curtailing attention, corners and collaboration, the role of natural consequences, comforted conversations, and caring about self-concept. So all the C's today. First, a little about Sue for those that don't know her. She's a teacher, a psychologist, academic, a keynote speaker, and an international consultant. She's an honorary professor at University College London, director of Growing Great Schools Worldwide, and a fellow of the British Psychological Society. She's a prolific author, having written numerous books, chapters and articles on all aspects of school and student wellbeing, including behaviour, relationships, social and emotional learning, and school culture. In 2024, she was given the Outstanding Contribution Award by the National Association of Pastoral Care in Education, and she's currently co-editing the Handbook of Wellbeing in Education and is proud to be Suna, the grandmother of 3 grandchildren. So, Sue, over to you.
Thanks very much, Gail. Can everybody hear me okay? Just checking that the sound is okay. That's fantastic. Yep. Thanks a lot. I'm not Sinna to my grandchildren. I'm Sunna, S-U-N-N-A. Just checking that. Okay. I hope some of you managed to catch the last webinar that we did on shaping positive behaviour, because this definitely follows on from that. It's about managing the challenging, and Gail has already covered what we're going to be talking about today. One of the things that I'm very aware of is that many of you will already know a lot of what I'm going to be talking about. I think what this is a lot about is about reminding people about the fact that the way that you think about children and their behaviour impacts on not only what you feel about yourself and about them, but also what you do. And this is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about different ways of thinking. Now, I'm going to start off by actually talking about the importance of actually thinking about what is age appropriate. Now, we know that children are not miniature adults. But if you actually watch some of the interactions between adults and children, you'd forget that. You wouldn't think that that was actually the case. They are at a very different developmental level. They have different emotional behaviours. They have different rational behaviours. They are, in fact, not quite rational when they're that little. But how we respond to children has a huge impact, not only on their learning, but how they think and feel about themselves, whether or not they think they can have any control over the world as they grow. Every interaction that there is actually has to consider the needs of the child, but also the needs of the adult. And sometimes those are in a bit of conflict. So how can we tune in to children's developmental needs so that the adults' needs are not dismissed, but they don't actually dominate? And you'll hear me say over and over again that you need to be looking after yourselves in order to do this with patience and maturity. We are the adults in these situations. So let's start at the very beginning. You quite often find that when people are in discussion about a newborn or a child up to about the age of maybe 6 months, people say, is she a good baby? And what we actually mean by that, or what they mean by that, is, does she sleep all the time? If she's a good baby, she makes very few demands on you. But that is not actually good. That is actually slightly easier to settle, maybe. And I know this very well because I had my second child, my son, was a very, very colicky baby. It was incredibly difficult to settle. And on the one hand, I loved him to bits, you know, I never wanted anything bad to happen to him. On the other hand, there were times when I could throw him through the window. So I know the conflicting emotions that there are sometimes when you're actually holding on to the thought that this is a tiny baby and this tiny baby needs your protection and and your love and your care, and they are not good or otherwise. Some children are just more difficult to settle. They are sometimes finding feeding difficult, but that doesn't make them not good. When you're handed your adorable new baby, the last thing you're thinking about is what happens when they're 2 or 3 or 4. Because they then start to understand that they are separate individuals in this world. And more than anything else, they absolutely want to do things for themselves. It's the age of growing independence. And of course, what then happens is that they get phenomenally frustrated. They get frustrated because they find it hard to do things. They get frustrated because things ought to go the way they want them to, and they don't. They get frustrated sometimes because they can't communicate. And if I was ever going to sort of have a campaign about anything, my campaign would be talk to your baby. Children need as much language as possible. And of course, different parts of the brain deal with receptive language, what children understand, and expressive language, what they can say. So they can understand a great deal more than they can say. And not being able to say words actually causes them a lot of difficulty, and often the adults in that situation as well. I think that it's worth thinking about baby sign language, so that they at least have some signs that they can manage before they can actually speak. Now they get a bit older and they are still, although their language might get a lot better, it doesn't mean that their understanding and their rationality gets a lot better. This is a very recent picture of my 3-year-old grandson, who likes to hide when I arrive. And his whole idea, his whole thinking is, you can't see me, so I can't see you. And that for me just illustrates really, really well the completely different way his brain works from someone who is older and not totally egocentric. Small children are egocentric, and they pretty well stay that way until they're about 7 years old, although some children do develop a bit younger than that. So what helps when we're actually thinking about the importance of developmental levels? We need to be thinking about what any challenge behaviour means. It's different at a toddler stage, it's different at a 4-year-old. What does that mean for that child and their development? A lot of the time, challenging behaviour is about a battle for control. Children want to get a grip on their world. They want to understand it, and they want to feel that they can be actors in their world and they can make a difference. And what that means is that a lot of the behaviour that can make absolutely no sense to us can be seen as that child's aim and need to actually feel that they have got some control of their environment, of their world, that they can make a difference. And of course, if you powerfully assert adult control as a result of that or in response to that, that does not help. So what might help in that situation is actually giving the child as much agency as possible, giving them choices wherever you can, chances wherever you can, and collaboration. And I'm going to be talking more about that. And although we probably know that children who are neurodiverse need a lot of warning about changes and transitions, nearly every child does. If you're with a child in one situation and you're going to be moving, like if you're you're in a park or in a playground, and they're gonna, in 5 minutes time, you're gonna want to move and go somewhere else, you need to give children warnings that that's going to happen, so it doesn't happen out of the blue. And actually thinking outside the box. So finding out how much you can be flexible. And I'll just give you a little example that happened last weekend. I was with my grandson and my daughter in a cafe, and he said he was thirsty, and his mum said, you can have water, you can have a baby chino, or you can have some cold milk. What do you want? Well, he was having a little bit of a tantrum because he didn't want any of that. I don't want water, I don't want cold milk, and I don't want a cappuccino. And everything was, he wanted a smoothie and he wasn't going to have it. He'd already had enough of that sort of food that day. So in the end, we thought a little bit outside the box, and we said, now water comes into two different types. It comes as still water and it comes as fizzy water. So maybe you would like fizzy water. So you're getting a little bit of control, and we're sticking to our guns about what you can and can't have. And that actually worked. Sometimes thinking outside the box works, but you have to be in a good state yourself to be able to do that. Now, I don't know about you, but I am not at my most amenable when I'm very tired, when I'm hungry, when I'm really worried about something, when I'm feeling well under the weather, when I'm too hot, too cold, maybe I'm scared, or maybe I'm confused. I don't know what's going on. Now, we know that positive emotions, so that when we are comfortable and feeling content, then we are much, much more able to problem solve, to be creative, and to learn. There's a lot of work done by positive psychologists such as Professor Barbara Fredrickson on the importance of positivity and actually enhancing as many positive emotions as possible, because we know that negative emotions do the opposite. So when somebody is not behaving in compliant ways, perhaps it's worth attending to the basics first. Would a drink work? Maybe a snack? Do you have a routine for napping? And sometimes I know with the little ones around me at the moment that there's an awful lot of jiggling about and refusing to go to the toilet. So a visit to the toilet can sometimes work. Maybe a cuddle. All of those things might actually deal with some of the basics that actually contribute to challenging behaviour. Now, that little girl is quite clearly not feeling very well, and the other little girl looks like she's pretty sad or anxious or worried about something. So both those things would need to be dealt with first. But the other thing about tired is that when we are tired, very often we are sleepy. When children are tired, sometimes they are hyperactive. I don't know whether you've seen that, but I have certainly seen it many times. And they tell you they're not tired, but actually it's a certain way of being exhausted, which actually doesn't help matters very much. And sometimes you need to have recognise that child actually needs to be getting ready for actually calming down and ready for bed, you know, a wash, a book, something like that. What else helps is that you don't take it personally. I mean, I know that some people think that when a child turns around and says, I'm not going to do that and I hate you, they can take it personally very quickly. That is not what's going on there. That's developmental. That's about that child wanting control. And your modelling of being calm actually really, really matters. You state calmly what you want to happen several times. And again, I'm going to say you need to look after yourself. But first, if I say to you, don't think of an elephant, what's immediately in your head? An elephant, right? Now, that's absolutely obvious, isn't it? But what we do with children is that we frequently tell them, don't do this, don't do that, don't do the other. And what that does is it has in that child's head what you don't want them to do. Wherever possible, tune into the neuropsychology. Help that child have an image in their head of what you want them to do. So rather than don't make a mess, it's help me clear this up. And you give children information rather than condemnation. So rather than that, it's really bad for you not to eat all that food up. It's like, you know, what you need to do is eat a couple more mouthfuls so I can see that you've had enough to eat. And you need to talk to children in a language they can understand. And I'm going to underline that word briefly. So many adults dress up what they are saying with lots and lots of unnecessary information. Keep it brief. Children can only take on so much information at one time. I can only take on only so much information at any one time. If I'm actually trying to do something on my computer and my very helpful husband gives me 4 instructions, I remember the first or the last, not the middle 2. Talk to children briefly. Please do this. It's also, tuning again into the neuropsychology, it's much easier to do something than to stop something, actually. And wherever possible, give visual, pointing, verbal, and physical clues where possible. Quite often, maybe starting something with a child to show them what they needed to do. Don't leave them in any doubt about what's wanted. And I want to just have a moment here to talk about the importance of tone and volume as well as words. Children who are shouted at, if they're not used to being shouted at, then they can be frightened. It makes them feel unsafe. If they are used to being shouted at, they tune out. Very often they will hear the volume and the tone. They will not necessarily hear what you are saying. And again, I think I probably talked about strengths and the importance of language in the Shaping Behaviour webinar that we did before. We should never tell children that they are bad, hopeless, stupid, or any other negative term, because that will impact on their self-concept, how they see themselves, and they might very well live up to that label. And I would say that although you can talk about difficult and challenging behaviour, please do not tell children they are naughty. People do it all the time. Children start thinking of themselves like that, and then they'll say, I'm a naughty person, therefore I can do this. Words really do matter. Now, one of the things that people also do quite a lot, which isn't helpful, is that they give a lot of attention to difficult behaviour. And attention is very, very rewarding to young children. It's what they want. And we often give much more attention to children when they're not doing as you would like them to do than than when they are behaving in the way. So that reinforces what you don't want to see. So I'm going to go through a whole sequence of things that you can do when a child is not being compliant and being challenging. The first thing you do is state what is wanted, again, in a calm voice. If the child does as they're asked, show you're really pleased with them. So you're giving attention for the positive. Then repeat the instruction. Reminders and reminders, not reprimands, right? Unless what they're doing is unsafe and they're continuing to ignore you, stop giving them your attention. Don't look at them, laugh with them, or speak with them. Now, When children are not used to this, they will probably go out of their way to behave worse in order to get your attention. So it takes time to get this strategy in place. But believe you me, it really does work when you actually stick with it. After a while, you may say, you know what to do. I'll talk to you again when you've done what I've asked. And when the child complies, show you're pleased and then start interacting normally again. Come on, let's play with this. Come on, let's cook this. Come on, let's do this. Do not plead with them, cajole with them, bribe them, or rage. All of that gives them attention. Stay calm, in control, and stand away, if it's safe to do so. I've seen so many parents give children so much attention for challenging non-compliant behaviour, when in fact, if they stop doing that, it would work. I'm just going to give you a little example of what I did when my children were a bit older. It wasn't when they were very young, but it's just an example. The plan is that I would cook dinner and their job was to lay the table. So I let them know that dinner was almost ready and they needed to come and lay the table. And I got in a minute, in a minute, in a minute, in a minute. So I just switched everything off, got myself an interesting book and went upstairs and sat on my bed with my book. Well, of course, after a little while, they're coming and saying, where's dinner? And I'm saying, my job's to cook dinner. Your job was to lay the table. I did my job. You've not done yours. Therefore, everything has stopped. Well, it was a very simple little lesson, but they didn't forget it. So that next time they were much more likely, if they were hungry, to come and help lay the table. And what happens as well when a child goes on and on and on and on and on at you, and you've said no, 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 no. And in the end, usually from absolute exhaustion, or maybe because you think other people are looking at you, you say, all right then. You do it for a quiet life. You give in to the screams and wails. What happens? It's a very simple learning. The children learn that the more fuss they make, the more likely they'll get what they want in the end. So what happens there is you make things much, much, much worse in the long run. And of course, if a child is used to getting what they want, it may take time to unlearn this. Once you have said no, stick to it. And maybe you can just say, I'll think about it, rather than saying no. But if you give in to the screams, you're reinforcing that behaviour. Now, sometimes children, many children, we all need a hand to do the right thing. We all get stuck from time to time. We all need other people to help us. And this is where you offer to do things together, perhaps as a game. There are so many different things that you can do to get children to comply. I'm going to close my eyes and I'm going to sing this song. And when I get to the end of this song, I want to see whether or not all these things have been picked up. You can do races against time. You can use, maybe some nice app on a phone. You can use puppets, dolls, teddies, on I'll say even a pumpkin, to put some humour in the situation and give a different perspective. And this is me using a pumpkin to actually practice sitting on a potty the other day, and got the pumpkin to talk, and it caused so much laughter. My grandson forgot about being difficult about going to the toilet. But what works for one child may not work for another, and it might not work all the time. Trying lots and lots of different things. Now, I know that the work that you do as adults with young children, that you have probably used many, many creative ideas that have actually helped resolve difficult, challenging situations, creative or collaborative. And it would be really nice if some of you put those ideas in the chat, and that we can actually have a look at them at the end of this webinar. Now, punishment does not work in the longer term. If it has no association with the behaviour, it can make children afraid. Sometimes it increases anger. And if they think that the punishment is unfair, then there will be consequences for that child in the way they think about themselves. But natural consequences are okay. And they're linked to what the child did or didn't do that's problematic. And there are so many ways of introducing natural consequences. So just as an example, if a child is very, very slow getting ready for bed and they maybe won't clean their teeth, a natural consequence to that would be telling them, if you don't hurry up a bit, if we don't get this done, then we won't be able to read 3 stories. Maybe it'll only be 2. If you take a very long time, there'll be only time for 1 story. And the other thing is to bear in mind, as we've already said, the ego-centricity of young children. A consequence has to make sense to them. So it's possible to say to a child, if you don't share the toys in the playground, then other people won't share them with you. You don't want that to happen. Make it applicable to what they want and need. And afterwards, and people so often forget about the importance of after a major incident, after a challenging time. Conversations really, really matter. Have these conversations when things have calmed down. You don't have the conversations in the height of strong emotion, because children are unable to hear what you say. They're unable to engage with you. But the first thing you need to make very, very clear is that it is the behaviour that is unacceptable. It is behaviour, it is unwanted. You, the child, is loved. You are loved. You are lovable. And that matters a great deal, because once that child has heard that, then you are able to talk to them about their behaviour. They might very well have been upset by what they did. Children are. And actually sort of saying, you know, probably made you feel a bit bad. Make links with their emotions in what they have done that's challenging. And then construct a future plan. What might happen next time? And what might you do next time? What would make sense next time? And then you give them care and you give them cuddles and you create that positive self-concept. I know that you're usually a kind person. So what you did there was unkind. That was unkind behaviour. We must help you be more kind next time. What could you do that was kind next time? So there's lots of important conversation to be had about reinforcing the learning after challenging situations have happened. If you want more information from Growing Great Schools Worldwide, you can sign up and get 3 or 4 newsletters a year from me, which has just got links to all sorts of information, research, books, etc. And you might like to look at a couple of the books that I've written on behaviour. One of them was in 2019, was the Primary Behaviour Cookbook, which is about a whole load of different sorts of behaviours and how you might actually think about those, what you might need to find out, what you do when that behaviour is happening and what you do afterwards. And that's my email address.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sue. That was really, really informative. I think I said this last time. I wish I'd listened to some of your stuff, because I can just see myself, the errors I made as a parent, you know, like saying to my son, don't be naughty. You think, you know, actually what the impact is and how they then act up more, because actually they didn't believe they're naughty. And, you know, so what you say today makes so much sense. And I'm sure a lot of the practitioners on the call will agree. So thank you so much. We've had a few questions in already. So if you don't mind, I'm going to just kick off on that. We had one from a Miss A Thorne, just in the chat. How do you support a child during group time and they are not paying attention? Any suggestions there?
I think that one of the things is to again have that conversation with them and ask them what would help them listen to a story, or what would help them listen to other people, because sometimes children will give you the answer. You'd be really surprised. We often underestimate children, even young children, about what they might be able to tell you. Or you say, if you can't listen very well, is there something that you'd like to look at or do, or maybe have in your hands that will help you to listen? So you give them some ideas as well. The social emotional learning that I do gives children lots and lots of opportunities to practice listening and paying attention. So children are often in pairs and they talk to each other about something very simple, what they love to eat, whether or not they've got a pet. So they talk with each other for a couple of minutes each and they listen. And sometimes you ask them to actually tell everybody else what your partner said, so that hones their listening skills. Lots of children find it quite hard to listen, especially when they're not feeling 100%. So it's worth thinking about how we help children practice listening. I've also played games with kids where I've given 2 or 3 children a part of a story, and I said when they hear their name or their character mentioned in the story, they maybe put their hands on their head or something, and that also sort of is another way of helping them hone their listening.
That's a great example, making them actually take ownership of that. I love it. Maria said, I always done ignoring even with my child when they were young, and I always work. I never gave them treats for them to behave. As to me, it's wrong. I believe we should not give treats for them to behave. They have to know they have to behave because it's the rules. Okay, that's a mouthful. Sorry for me. I'm trying to read and actually speak. But that's good insight. Thanks, Maria. Yes, I agree. I think Sue will agree as well. Don't reward negative behaviour. So definitely.
Absolutely. Yes.
We also have another one saying, how can we quickly judge what is age appropriate behaviour when we are supporting a child in the moment? Any suggestions there?
Normally, it's just about thinking about normal developmental levels. If you're working with a whole load of 2-year-olds, you'll know that age appropriate behavior is quite often trying to assert some control in the situation. So developing those skills of independence, getting better at things, all of that. If people are actually working in early years settings, they will have had some guidance on child development and what is appropriate child developmental behaviors. And I think that very largely seeing what's appropriate in the round in larger terms is quite helpful. And of course, some children are developing slightly more slowly than others. It's very useful for children to be able to find ways of communicating. In one school I visited recently, children don't necessarily have all the words for the way they feel, but those they're given 4 different colours for different sorts of feelings. So the green zone would be happy and contented, the red zone would be feeling frustrated or cross, or there's 2 other zones, and they are actually told they'll say, I'm in the yellow zone today, I'm in the yellow zone, I'm feeling tired and not very well. It's called zones of regulation. It might be worth having a look at.
Oh, lovely. We've had and all these are coming in thick and fast. So I just lost my space. We had one that I wanted to quickly ask you for, which was from. Sorry about that. We had a person say they want more information. So yeah, so from Jane, she said, how do you deal with a child that is really offish, pushes you away when trying to cuddle them, kicking and punching? Is that normal? Obviously, it's not normal, but yes. What is your suggestion on that? How can they deal with that?
Basically, one of the things important is that children are learning about personal body boundaries. So maybe just asking a child before you actually try and get anywhere near them is say, you know, can I, do you need a cuddle? And because children will push you away if they don't feel safe in some way. So it's giving them the agency, it's putting it back in their court. And if they don't want to be touched, don't touch them.
Okay. And then it's the last one before I hand over to Gail, because she's got loads of questions as well. Abby's asked, I'd like a bit more input about natural consequences, for example, a child winding up another child, where one adult thinks they should be left to it and another thinks that should be supported from an adult. What do you recommend most?
It's difficult to actually see in terms of the actual situation, because things are different, ages are different. Again, the conversations matter. It's actually, and it's the way those conversations happen. It's not a conversation where you tell children what is or isn't okay. You actually say to them things like, we've noticed this, you know, what do you want to happen here? So we get them to start thinking about their behaviour and the outcomes of their behaviour. Natural consequences might be something you give them as a choice. You know, maybe you should perhaps choose to play with somebody else, or maybe that person will be not wanting to play with you if you're not nice to them, if you wind them up like that.
Gail, do you want to ask a few?
I've got some. So we have 2 or 3 in the chat that cover children with special educational needs and disabilities. So I'm going to read them. So how can you support SEND children with challenging behaviour, especially those who are non-verbal? And then one talks about that they use a lot of distraction. They have children obviously on the ASD pathway. But then another one says, what about if the child is possibly on the spectrum and doesn't fully understand instructions? So there's an understanding issue here and potentially a non-verbal issue.
I think that's really challenging for a lot of early years providers, that there are increasing numbers of children with SEND, particularly children who are neurodivergent in their classes. I mean, using signs, using Macaton signs may help. Doing things in very small steps help. Modelling what you need to happen, doing things with children helps. All of that things. And also, again, I will say, looking after yourself, because it can be emotionally very draining when you're actually working with children who are actually operating at a different developmental level sometimes, or behaving in ways that you wouldn't necessarily expect in the classroom. They're all steps, the doing things together, the modelling, the showing, all of that makes a difference. And of course, getting advice from people who are skilled in working with neurodivergent children, including your local educational psychology service.
Okay, thank you. One more for neurodivergence. Somebody here, Liz, says, how do you encourage a possible neurodivergent child to share? He really struggles and tends to scream at the other children if they touch any toy he has taken ownership of.
I think that we make it reasonably clear what things are for him alone, and I think the expectations on him to share should be done very, very slowly, and starting off with maybe an adult and a neurodivergent a child sharing together first, so he gets lots and lots of practice with an adult who will be much more understanding, and then maybe just with an adult and one other child. So it's a very staged process.
Thank you. Ellen Simran from Hamilton Nursery have asked, how can we support a single parent at home with a sibling with additional needs, however the child is copying behaviour, kicking and pushing mum to her limit, I guess. However, in the nursery we can provide small group and one-to-one support. So it's about that parent engagement, isn't it? Trying to really support the parents at home.
Oh my goodness me, this is so common, and I know that there's children all children copy their siblings. Some more than others, but it's very, very commonplace, and it's really quite hard. The thing that the parent needs to do is, first of all, they need to again look after themselves, find out where their emotional resources are, give themselves a bit of a break from time to time if that's at all possible. Maybe family members looking after the children for a while, but also give the sibling a bit of time themselves, and talking to that sibling about how special they are and about what's expected behaviour from them, so that you have a different relationship with the sibling than you do with a child who is neurodivergent. And it's sometimes true of what happens with older children and younger children. Sometimes when a new child, a younger sibling arrives, the older child feels their nose is put out of joint, and there needs to be a little bit of a special time for them to know that they are still special.
Thank you. Another one for parents at home. What would you advise if a child at home doesn't have a lot of boundaries in place? You're trying to deal with them in the setting, and the behaviour is affecting the setting as a whole. So that's probably quite common as well.
Oh, absolutely it is. One of the things that it's worth saying here is that I know that children do eventually learn to operate differently in different settings. Context does matter, and children will learn that different things are expected in different contexts. So you say, here, this is what we do. Here, this is what we do. Here, this is the routine. Here, this is what the regulations are. And the other thing, of course, is to as much as possible invite parents in to tell them what you're doing, so that I did some my doctoral research was with parents whose children had behaviour problems, about their interactions with schools. And I can remember one single parent who had twins who both had a level of special need, who said that her conversations with teachers in schools made all the difference to how she managed at home. So it's just about saying, you know, we know you're struggling, this is what we're managing, you know, maybe you can actually try this, just one thing at a time, and see whether or not it makes any difference. So you're giving her not only the physical, practical support, but also some emotional support as well.
Great advice. Thanks, Sue. We've only got about 10 minutes left. We're not going to get through all the comments. I'm going to stick with the questions, Sue, but I would encourage everybody to look at the comments.
I would love to hear a couple of the creative comments. I did ask people.
Creative comments.
Yes.
So there's a couple of really good ones here, actually. Let's have a look. We have Maria Rice says, and this was very early on in your presentation when you were talking about punishment. So punishment is not what they need. They need to learn from bad behaviour, as consequences don't matter. If it's good behaviour or bad behaviour, it's always important after the child has calmed down. We have to, what we do is we explain what they have done is not acceptable and can put them in danger or others, and never say you had a bad behaviour to me. I said what you have done was not a good thing. Never intended that the child is bad, and which is good. Helen Amstel says that I find explaining slowly and gently to children why their challenging behaviour is not nice. They are more eager to behave nicely. For example, say if you, the child, keep on opening the tap and leaving it open, all the water will run away. And it's such a pity because ducks need water to swim, and we are making all their water just run away. I love that.
Oh, that's fabulous. You know, things like that, creative ideas like that, you know, I mean, they might sound daft to us, but actually they work with kids. You know, it's really lovely to hear those. Thank you.
That's okay. Small Wonders Day Nursery say proximal praise, persona dolls, social stories to reinforce positive behaviour. So that's quite good.
Books are fantastic, by the way. Stories really do work. Reading stories over and over again about kindness, about inclusion, about the behaviours that we do want, really, really do help.
And let's have a look.
There's one further down from Zainab saying,
yeah,
I noticed that my daughter's attitude towards rewards was an attentive way to want more. So stop giving out behaviour rewards and instead will hug or say thank you to her. This has seemed to work even on my other children. That's quite clever, isn't it? Because sometimes they just want that reward, but actually just physical attention, a hug, or, you know, from mum or dad, or even from someone that's at the nursery, is amazing.
Can I just say something else about that? I think sometimes helping children tune into how they feel when they've done something well. You're actually saying, hey, that made you feel really good, didn't it? And they'll go, oh, yes. And making the links between wanted, kind behaviour is with how they feel really makes a difference.
I think Jessica talks about ignoring and redirecting helps, being consistent and patient in repeating what is needed. And there's a couple here about behaviour at home, how to deal with it in the setting. And there's one that talks about the behaviour at the setting due to what they've seen at home, or maybe what they've seen on television.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
That must be difficult. What else have we got? Gosh, they're all coming in here.
Can I just say, as well, is that also the communication between an early years setting and home is really important on so many levels. It needs to be positive about individual children wherever possible, but also to give guidance around a whole load of other important things, and actually making sure that children aren't seeing violent things on TV, because it's actually impacting on their behaviour. And I think that early years settings have almost have a responsibility as well as an opportunity to give those messages home, because I don't think all parents realise that children will copy what they see on a screen.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us have got experience of that. Susanna says, I really loved your webinar because you have come up with real life experiences, which is great, Sue. And also you put your humour in it. Thank you so much for your hard work today.
That's nice, thank you.
And Jessica says quite a humorous thing, pretending I misheard what the child said when they were shouting, but saying funny words, and it made them laugh and help them calm down so that we could discuss. So it's just breaking that down.
Fabulous, thank you.
Yeah, there's one from Eleanor. She's just posted that one more time, so she clearly wants an answer on this. She's asking, how would you deal with an unwanted behaviour that is unsafe in a classroom environment with other children around?
That's a really, really important and challenging question. I mean, when you can't ignore unsafe behaviour, but you can have the conversations about it. And you can actually sort of say, you know, you might have, where would you like to sit so that you are, or where would you like to be playing so that you're not going to be hurting others? I think it's the sort of unsafe behaviour that is specific, that would actually need a more detailed response to that. But I think that it is it's a big issue for some early years settings, is that some children do demonstrate more unsafe behaviour, and that's not good for the other kids.
Yeah, I mean, just to say, I did put it in the chat because a lot of questions is about SEND. We do our next webinar, so just to answer that is we've got Joanna Grace on again in January, so that's all about SEND and neurodivergent, so please do register for that. So if you've got any questions, because a lot of the time the behaviour as well, we have that is with children are feeling frustrated but struggling to communicate, so you know there's definitely some support there as well. But I've absolutely loved. If there's anything you else want to add to, Sue, please share if there's anything that you want to add to the questions. But we've had a fantastic engaged audience today, which has been brilliant. Sue, from our side, obviously you are our resident guest and speaker by now, so we'll obviously have you back in 2026. I can't believe we're talking about 2026.
I know, it's
anyway,
ridiculous. Time flies.
It does indeed. We have absolutely loved having you here. There's a lot of other questions as well, which we'll obviously add into the presentation we'll be sending out to everybody. But everybody that's been on the call today, I know I can see numbers are dropping because people have to get back into ratio probably. So thanks again for everybody attending. It's been a fantastic, and Sue from our side again, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So thanks everybody so much for all the work you do. Thank you.